I never thought the world would laugh at me, and my own son would lead the chorus. Before I tell you how it happened, I need 10 seconds of your patience. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. I'm George Harrison, 64, retired carpenter, widower, and the kind of man whose hands remember the shape of wood even in his sleep. My house sits on the edge of a small Oregon town. Fog on the creek in the mornings, cedar smell after rain, a porch that croaks like an old hound when you step on the middle board. For 30 years I built cabinets and churches, tables and baby cribs. When my wife Lydia got sick, I built hope out of invoices and overtime. When she passed, I built silence. My son Ethan built something else, an audience. The day it happened, I was in the back room, working on a chair that's older than he is. A rung kept slipping loose. It wanted to wobble the way knees do when you don't eat enough salt. I'd set the clamp and dab the joint with hide glue, the old school kind you heat until it smells like a barn after a storm. Radio was low, kettle higher. It was a day that made sense. Wood, heat, patience. The phone rang, not the hard line on the wall. That one only speaks when bill collectors or political campaigns need a friend. It was my cell, the cheap one with the spiderweb crack. On the screen, Marge from up the street. Marge is the sort who brings zucchini bread uninvited and opinions wrapped in wax paper. "George," she whispered, as if the phone could gossip back, "don't look at the internet." "I never do," I said. "Ethan posted something, TikTok, well, folks are sharing it. A lot. What is it?" Silence, a breath. "You fixing a chair?" I looked at the chair. It looked back at me. After we hung up, another buzz. "Tom from the hardware store. You seeing this?" "Sorry, man." Then Jess, the pastor's wife. "Praying for you." Then a number I didn't recognize. "El Mayo, your dad is the 80s handyman." The words stacked like shavings under a plane. I told myself not to look because I know the internet the way fishermen know storms, from a distance, with respect. But a father with a hammer is still a father, and sometimes you pick up the wrong tool out of habit. I opened the app. It didn't open me back. It pulled me in. The video starts with Ethan's face, bright like a storefront, teeth the color of new countertops. He's whispering to the camera as he pushes open my back door. "Watch this. Grandpa still thinks he's on Little House on the Prairie." He turns the camera, zooms on my hands as I brush glue along the mortise. He imitates my voice, gruffer than I ever sounded. "Back in my day, we didn't need screws, just spit and prayers." He laughs. The screen splits. One side me, the other him, doing a pantomime of an old man squinting at a tape measure he's reading upside down. Caption: "Teaching fossils to build. 80s handyman DIY fail. Ubuma talk." The audio is a song I don't recognize, just a fast drum and a brighter sneer. Text bubbles float like gnats. "He's cute, though. Imagine smelling like wood 24/7. "Okay, Grandpa, go off." Someone writes, "Get him a ring light and a retirement home." Another, "He's making that chair for the dinosaurs." I see my own kitchen in the frame. The dented kettle, Lydia's yellow pot holder, the glass jar of screws that used to hold peach preserves. To strangers, it's set dressing. To me, it's a memory that still has a temperature. I watch myself say nothing. I watch my son perform my silence. At the bottom left, numbers I don't understand but know are bad. 1.2 mem views. The little heart beating beside 340K. Comments fly faster than I can read them. Ethan pops back in frame. "Love you, Dad. Don't be mad. It's content." The words land like nails scattered on a driveway. Small, sharp, inevitable. The clamp squeaked when I tightened it. So did something in my chest. I text him. "Call me." The message turns blue, then still. A minute later, his reply. "Can't talk. Premiere in an hour." It's a trend. "You're trending?" I look up trend in the dictionary I keep in my head. It doesn't say anything about sons who turn their fathers into wind chimes. There's a thing about humiliation they don't tell you. It's not loud. It's a soft drop in the throat, like a tool slipping off the bench, and you don't hear it hit. You just know it fell. I put the phone down, rinse the brush, wipe the glue line with a damp rag. My hands do what they always do, fix. while my eyes read a language that doesn't care for repairs. The doorbell rings. It's Mr. Whitman, the mailman who's never learned how to whisper. He grins like he's found $1. "Heard you're famous, George." I sign for a package that isn't mine and watch him walk back down the path, still smiling at the thing following him in his pocket. Fame is a laugh that goes on without you. Inside, I stand in the doorway of the room that still smells like my wife's shampoo if you argue with the air long enough. Lydia died in late spring, when the rhododendrons forgave the rain and the hospital machines learned our names. Ethan was 22 then, fresh from a diploma and already filming his meals. He whispered to her forehead, "I'll make you proud." He did. For a time. He used to edit videos at the kitchen table and ask me to test sound levels by telling him stories about the churches I trimmed out. Say something carpentry. I'd say, "Nothing straight, only true." He'd grin and turn my words into captions. When money started coming in, he bought a car I couldn't pronounce and a jacket that fit him like sin. I didn't say a thing. Who am I to argue with wind? But the wind that lifts you up is the same wind that steals your breath when you stand too close to the edge. I watched the video again because pain is a tape measure. You keep checking the length in case it shrank. Near the end, he leans close to my ear, my real ear in the footage, and says, "Smile, Dad, you're good content." I don't smile. I never did. I squint into the grain of the wood as if the chair could answer the question I haven't asked. Another buzz. "Bro, your dad's a vibe." "Put him in the next one." Do the prank where you switch his glue with syrup. I imagine sticky joints and ants crawling through the table legs, and the thought is so ridiculous it makes me laugh. Then it makes me tired. Outside, the creek carries yesterday away. Inside, I sit at the bench and stare at the glue line until it turns into a horizon. I could call him again. I could drive across town to his new apartment that pretends it's a hotel lobby and ring a bell that rings for no one. I could leave a message, "Son, my dignity has a thermostat and you turned it down too low." But he wouldn't hear it. The algorithm in his head would compress my voice into background noise. I reach for Lydia's potholder. It's frayed where her thumb always caught the corner of hot pans. I keep it near the kettle for no reason except the oldest one. It was hers. I remember the night we brought Ethan home, how he cried like ambition and slept like debt. We promised to be good at this. We promised to be a house with windows that opened. We promised to teach him where nails go and where words don't. I open the front door. The air is damp with pine and a little gasoline from the neighbor's mower. Down the street, a gaggle of teenagers huddle over a phone, a shared fire in their hands. One of them looks up at me the way you look at a billboard you've already seen. I wave. He doesn't wave back, but he does something almost kinder. He looks away. Back at the bench, I depress the clamp, test the chair. It doesn't wobble anymore. Wood is honest. If you press it right and wait, it holds. People, their fibers run in directions you don't see until the plane catches and the long curl lifts away, revealing fresh face beneath. I set the chair aside and let it cure under the window, where the afternoon light forgives what the morning exposes. The phone buzzes again. I turn it face down. I can't stop a million strangers from thinking I'm funny. I can't stop a son from mistaking cruelty for charisma, but I can tell you the truth. So you don't have to wonder what sound a heart makes when it learns a new language. I built a home for him with my bare hands. He built laughter from my pain. The morning after the video broke, the world outside my window was the same. Grey sky, slow drizzle, pine trees nodding like old witnesses. But inside my head, something fundamental had split. I brewed coffee, the kind you measure by instinct rather than spoons, and tried not to check my phone. I failed. The notifications hadn't stopped overnight. Ethan's video had crossed 3 million views, and the comment section had turned into a public square of mockery. People had duetted, stitched, remixed. A college kid made a parody calling me the relic of Oregon. Another girl used my face as a reaction meme for men who still pay with cash. I thought humiliation would burn. It didn't. It hummed, quiet, constant, like a fluorescent light you can't switch off. When I stepped out to buy nails from Tom's Hardware, the usual nods from neighbors were gone. People still spoke, but differently. "Morning, George," said Tom, voice too soft, eyes too careful. Behind me a whisper. "That's him." I stood in line at the counter, pretending not to hear. The TV mounted on the wall above the drills played morning news. My name wasn't there, of course, but my son's was. Local influencer Ethan Harrison hits 3 million followers with viral boomer handyman clip. The anchor smiled like it was a feel-good story. I paid for my nails and left them on the counter. At home, I found the old photo albums Lydia used to keep under the couch. Dust bloomed like grey breath when I opened the first one. There was Ethan at 6, helping me sand a table, his little palms dusted white, eyes bright with pride. I'd written on the back of the photo, "First project together." I turned the photo over again, studying the grain, the faint fingerprints Lydia must have left when she glued it in. She used to say, "George, every mark tells a story. I never imagined one day the marks would be digital. Permanent, cruel." That night I tried to sleep but couldn't. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. Its light cutting through the dark. Messages poured in. A cousin from Idaho sent, "Saw the video, kids these days, huh? My ex-boss from the mill. Didn't know you had a sense of humor. George." I muted the phone and turned it face down. Through the thin curtain, I saw the outline of the rocking chair I'd repaired years ago for Lydia. Its motionless silhouette reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Stillness has its own language, but the stillness didn't last. By morning, Ethan had posted another video. This time, he was with his girlfriend Sierra, a woman who looked like she'd never touched dust in her life. They were sitting on my porch steps laughing. Sierra mocked my voice, nagging him to eat cheap food like his broke dad. Ethan clapped his hands and said, "That's exactly what he sounds like." The video had a new title, "Parenting Done Wrong Challenge." The comments were worse than the first round. "LMAO, this guy's dad is peak cringe. You can smell the sawdust through the screen. He probably still uses cash." I closed the app before I could finish reading. My hands were shaking, but not from anger, from shame. When Lydia was alive, she used to worry Ethan was too soft, too drawn to appearances. I told her he'll learn. The world teaches hard. She smiled sadly and said, "Some kids learn, George. Some perform learning until it's too late." Now her voice echoed in my head like a prophecy I'd ignored. That afternoon, Father O'Neill from the local church stopped by. He didn't mention the videos, but the pity in his eyes gave him away. He said, "George, if you ever need someone to talk to, my door's open." I thanked him and changed the subject to weather. After he left, I walked into my workshop. It smelled of oak varnish and thyme. Every piece of wood in that room knew my fingerprints. I ran a hand along the bench, smooth as memory. There were days when Ethan used to sit there, feet swinging, asking about tools. "Dad, why do you measure twice and cut once?" "Because wood forgives fewer mistakes than people," I'd told him. Funny how true that turned out to be. As dusk settled, I sat by the window watching the rain bead on the glass. Across the street, a couple of teenagers pointed their phones at my house, laughing. I could guess the captions they'd use. "The old carpenter's cabin." I thought about deleting the internet altogether, erasing myself from whatever world he had built. But then I realized my erasure was his content. If I disappeared, he'd just post, "Dad's gone rogue." I needed a different language, one older than hashtags. That night, I took out my old notebook, the one with measurements and half-finished sketches. I drew a line down the middle of a blank page. On one side, I wrote what he's taken, on the other, what remains. Under what he's taken, pride, privacy, peace. Under what remains, time, skill, silence. I stared at the second list for a long while. Then I added one more word, patience. It was small comfort, but it was something the internet couldn't copy, couldn't remix, couldn't sell. Before sleeping, I stepped outside for air. The sky was ink, the town quiet except for a distant train. I looked at my reflection in the window pane, wrinkles deep. Eyes tired, but still mine, I whispered into the dark. If the son forgets respect, the father must remember wisdom. The words didn't fix anything, but they steadied my hands. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start repairing something else. Something he couldn't film, couldn't mock and couldn't monetize. Myself, the next morning, I woke up before dawn, the way I used to when I had contracts to finish before a client inspection. Only this time, there were no blueprints, no lumber deliveries, just a man and his silence, both unfinished. The kitchen clock ticked with a rhythm that sounded almost like mockery. Every tick reminded me of that video still spreading through screens, through towns, through people who'd never smell sawdust in their lives. But even humiliation runs out of steam if you don't feed it. I poured black coffee into Lydia's favorite mug, the one with a faded blue rim, and stared out the window. The mist hung low over the creek, and the pines were bowed under it like they were sharing my secret. Somewhere inside me, the shame was cooling into something sharper, steadier. I went to the workshop. It greeted me the way it always did, with honesty. No pretense, no filter. Wood only tells you the truth. I lifted the sheet covering Lydia's old rocking chair. The varnish had dulled over the years, and one leg had cracked clean through. I set it on the bench. That chair had history. Lydia had rocked Ethan to sleep in it when he was a baby, sung him lullabies about stars and safe places. The crack running down its leg felt like a map of what had become of us. I sanded it slowly, carefully. The rasping sound filled the air, drowning out the phantom noise of internet laughter. With every motion I remembered the years that built me, each callus, each scar. The world had forgotten the difference between a craftsman's hands and a fool's performance. But I hadn't. Halfway through the sanding, I noticed something on the shelf, an old cigar box where I kept important papers. The key was still on the hook. I opened it. Inside were the deeds to the house, the savings account papers, the workshop registration, and a small folded letter Lydia had written before she passed. I'd never been brave enough to read it until that moment. Her handwriting, neat, deliberate, said, "George, if Ethan ever loses himself, don't lose yourself trying to find him. Remember, you built both of you with your hands. He'll have to rebuild himself with his." I folded the letter again and tucked it into my shirt pocket like armor. All these years, Ethan believed the house came from an inheritance, that the workshop was something passed down. The truth was uglier and truer. There had been no inheritance, just double shifts, sore backs, and one stubborn man refusing to give up after his wife's diagnosis. When Ethan was 10, he asked me once why I never took vacations. I told him, "Because nails don't drive themselves, son." He laughed back then, thinking I was joking. Now I wasn't laughing. By afternoon, I'd repaired the crack in the chair. The leg was clamped tight, the glue drying beneath the pressure. I brushed my hands on my jeans and looked around the workshop, at the sawdust, the curled wood shavings, the smell of turpentine. Everything here had been earned, and suddenly I knew dignity wasn't something someone could take. It was something you let them borrow when you stopped believing in yourself. I'd lent too much. I turned off my phone that night. No more messages, no more noise. Let the world spin without me for a while. Instead, I pulled out my notebook and started writing. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning justice, quiet and patient. The kind that takes shape the way wood bends to heat. Slow, deliberate, permanent. I wrote one line at the top of the page. "When they laugh at you, don't shout, build." Then I began to list what I'd built in my life. Line by line, a home, a marriage that only death could silence, a business from scratch, a son, once full of light. And below it I wrote the next truth. He thinks all this came from inheritance. I'll show him where it really came from. I spent that night cleaning, sweeping the workshop, polishing my tools, wiping down each surface like a ritual. Every stroke was a prayer. Every corner reclaimed was a reminder that the man in that viral video wasn't the man I saw in the mirror. Near midnight, I opened Lydia's letter one last time and whispered to her picture. "You were right. I can't fix him yet, but I can fix me." Before sleeping, I wrote one more note in the notebook. Short, but heavy with meaning. Tomorrow begins quietly. And it did. When the sun rose, its light fell across the chair I'd repaired. The glue had set perfectly. I sat in it and rocked for the first time in years. The movement was slow, steady, sure, like the heartbeat of forgiveness that hadn't yet come. But would. Somewhere, Ethan was probably celebrating another 1,000,000 views, another sponsorship, another lie that paid better than love. But that didn't matter now, because that morning, for the first time since the laughter started, I felt something stronger than shame. I felt control. It was a Saturday afternoon when the sound of tires on gravel broke my peace. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. Only one car in town roared that arrogantly. Ethan. He pulled up in a brand new SUV, the kind that cost more than the house he grew up in. The door slammed, followed by the sharp click of expensive heels. That would be Sierra, his girlfriend, the social media darling who spoke like every sentence came with a price tag. I stayed in the living room, sewing a torn curtain edge. My needle moved slower these days, but steady. The rhythm calmed me. The door opened without knocking. "Dad!" Ethan's voice was all brightness and performance, the same tone he used when pitching products online. "You should lock your door, old man. This neighborhood isn't what it used to be." I didn't look up. "It's still my neighborhood." Sierra followed behind him, sunglasses on indoors, scanning the room like an appraiser pretending to be polite. "This place has such a vintage charm," she said, dragging out the word vintage until it sounded like expired. Ethan laughed. "Yeah, it's got that 70s aesthetic. We might keep some of it when we move in." The curtain needle paused mid-air. "Move in?" I asked, eyes still on the fabric. He grinned. "Yeah, temporarily. Our new apartment's getting renovated. Thought it'd be good to stay here for a few weeks. You could use company anyway." "Company?" I murmured. "Or free rent?" Sierra's smile thinned. Ethan chuckled like it was all a misunderstanding. "Come on, Dad. Don't be dramatic. You've got plenty of space. And hey, maybe I can help you modernize this place. Turn it into a proper influencer pad." I tied off the stitch and set the curtain aside. "I built this house with my hands, not a filter. It doesn't need modernizing," he shrugged. "Whatever you say." He wandered around the living room, touching things that weren't his. Lydia's photo on the mantel, the wooden clock I carved our 2nd year of marriage. Sierra pointed at the clock and giggled. "That's cute. Looks like something from a thrift store." That was when something inside me began to tighten. Not anger. Not yet, just the slow coiling of respect being strangled. Ethan plopped down on the couch, scrolling his phone. "So, Dad," I was thinking, "we could shoot a video here, like reconnecting with my roots or something. The fans would eat it up." "I'll tag you this time." "Tag me," I repeated. "Like a piece of furniture," he laughed. "Come on, don't take it so personally. You're trending again anyway." Someone clipped that first video and added sad music. "It's practically a meme now." Sierra chimed in. "You should be proud, Mr. Harrison. Not everyone's dad goes viral." I looked at her then, really looked. Perfect hair, flawless skin, and eyes that had never known the weight of responsibility. "Pride," I said slowly, "isn't something that comes from followers." Ethan sighed, tapping his phone like I was wasting his time. "Dad, you don't get it. The world's changed. People make money off attention now. That's what success looks like." I stood up. "No, son. That's what hunger looks like. You keep feeding it and it eats you next." He rolled his eyes. "Here we go again, the carpenter's wisdom speech. You can save it. You're welcome for the exposure." Sierra snickered. That was the last straw. I placed the curtain neatly on the table, turned to them, and said quietly, "Do you know what the saddest thing in the world is, Ethan? Watching your child mistake humiliation for love." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You mocked me because it made strangers like you," I said, stepping closer. "You used the man who raised you to entertain people who wouldn't lend you $1 if your lights went out." He scoffed. "Dad, stop acting like a victim. Everything you have because of me. I put our name out there. You'd still be sanding chairs in silence if it weren't for me." I met his eyes, steady. "Everything I have I built before you could walk. You didn't make me visible, Ethan. You made me ashamed." Sierra shifted uneasily. "Ethan, maybe we should go—" "No," he snapped. He's just jealous because I made something of myself. I walked to the desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out a folder. The property deeds, the workshop registration, the savings accounts, all in my name. I laid them on the table one by one, like cards in a quiet game. "This house," I said, tapping the papers. "The apartments, the accounts, the business, they're all mine. Always were. You didn't build them. You didn't even know where they came from." Sierra blinked. "Wait, what?" She turned to Ethan. "You told me you inherited all this." His face flushed crimson. "That was years ago," he muttered. I nodded. "Yes, and in those years you've built nothing but shadows. You've inherited my effort and spent it on your image." I walked to the door, opened it wide. The wind outside was cold, biting through the silence. "Get out!" Ethan froze. "What? You heard me. You can come back when you learn how to behave. Until then, you're just another stranger trespassing on decency." Sierra grabbed her purse, muttering something about not needing this drama. Ethan hesitated, jaw tight, pride heavier than common sense. "You'll regret this," he said finally. "I already do," I replied. They left. Sierra's heels clacked down the path, Ethan's voice fading into angry mutters. The SUV's engine roared, then disappeared down the road. Inside, the house exhaled. I locked the door, walked to the window, and watched the taillights vanish. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. On the table, the documents still lay in neat rows, proof not of wealth but of work. Of a life that had value long before likes and algorithms decided what mattered. I gathered them carefully and whispered to the empty room. A father's silence is louder than a son's arrogance. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed, not angry, not broken, just certain. The boy who thought he owned everything had finally learned what it means to own nothing. Morning came with that sharp Oregon chill that seeps into the bones before the coffee can reach them. The night before had left a strange peace behind. Not comfort, not victory, just a clarity that hummed in the quiet corners of the house. The kind of clarity that only comes after you've said what needed saying and closed the door on it. I stood by the window, watching mist slide off the trees. The phone sat on the counter face down. For a long moment I debated turning it on. I didn't want to see what the internet had done with my life overnight. Maybe they were laughing again. Maybe they'd already forgotten. Either way, it didn't matter. It was time to fix the one thing Ethan couldn't film. After breakfast, I took out my old briefcase, the leather one Lydia bought me when I opened my workshop. Inside were the papers I had shown him, the deeds, the accounts, the business registration, and tucked behind them, Lydia's letter. The edges were softer now, the ink beginning to fade, but her words still carried weight. "George, if Ethan ever loses himself, don't lose yourself trying to find him." That line echoed in my head as I drove into town. The lawyer's office was at the end of Main Street, across from the diner where I used to take Ethan after church. The same booths, the same smell of bacon grease and maple syrup. Everything in this town aged except pride. When I walked into Reed and Thompson Legal, the secretary looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Long time." "Too long," I said. Mr. Reed, my old friend, came out from his office. We'd gone to high school together. He became a man of papers. I became a man of wood. Both of us learned that things built right the first time last longer. He shook my hand, his eyes gentle but curious. "You're here about Ethan, I suppose?" I nodded. "It's time, Jack." We sat in his office, surrounded by books that smelled of dust and patience. I laid the documents on the table one by one. Titles, ownerships, bank statements. "I need to make some changes," I said quietly. "Remove Ethan as beneficiary from the savings. Transfer the workshop to my name exclusively. It's already in mine. But I want the records sealed to prevent any access. And I want to start a charitable clause in Lydia's memory." Jack leaned back. "You sure about this?" "I've never been surer. I'm not punishing him, Jack. I'm protecting what's left of us." He nodded, then reached for his pen. "Let's get started." The sound of his pen scratching across the paper was steady, almost rhythmic. It reminded me of sanding wood. Slow, deliberate, permanent. Each signature I wrote felt like closing a door, softly but firmly. As I signed the last page, Jack looked at me over his glasses. "You're doing the right thing, George. It won't be easy for him when he finds out, but maybe it'll be the lesson he needs. That's all I want," I said. "A lesson, not revenge." On the way home, I stopped by the bank. The teller recognized me. "Mr. Harrison, would you like to keep your son listed as an emergency contact?" I smiled faintly. "No, not anymore. Emergencies teach faster when they're real." She didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. Back home, I brewed another pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. I wrote everything that had happened in neat carpenter straight lines. The visit, the signatures, the silence that followed. I wasn't keeping records for the law. I was keeping them for myself. Then I added one more line beneath it all. "Justice isn't loud." It's signed quietly. That night I went to bed early. The house felt larger without anger in it. The air softer. Sometime after midnight my phone buzzed. I let it ring twice before turning it over. A message from Ethan. "Ethan, Dad, can we talk?" "Don't ignore me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just joking." "You're overreacting." Ethan again. "I'm doing all this for you." "You don't get it." For a long while I stared at those words. "For you." They used to mean something. Lydia used to whisper them when she made late-night tea for me after long shifts. Ethan used to say them as a boy when he brought home hand-drawn Father's Day cards, but now "for you" sounded like currency, something he traded to justify harm. I typed back only 2 words. "Then stop. No lecture. No explanation. Just truth." He didn't reply. I turned the phone off again and set it on the table beside Lydia's photo. Outside, the rain started, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the windows like fingertips keeping time. I sat there listening, letting the sound wash over me. I thought of all the times I'd tried to guide Ethan gently. The times I'd said yes when I should have said no. The moments I'd chosen peace over boundaries. But that was the thing about peace. Sometimes it has to come after the storm. By the time the rain stopped, I knew something had changed. My son might still be out there chasing applause, but I'd stopped chasing forgiveness, I whispered to the dark. The only thing a father can give that lasts longer than love is example. And that night I finally slept straight through until morning. No buzzes, no comments, no guilt. Just rain, silence, and the sound of my own heart, steady again. The call came on a Wednesday morning. I was in the workshop, sanding a tabletop, when the phone rang with that shrill insistence that always means bad news. It was the bank manager, Mr. Green, a polite man, but the kind whose tone turns stiff when the subject is unpleasant. "Mr. Harrison," he began, "we need to confirm a few things regarding recent activity on your account." He explained that someone had tried to move a large sum from my savings into another account. The request had come with a forged signature, my name, shaky but recognizable. They stopped it before the transfer went through. I didn't need to ask who it was. Was it my son? I asked quietly. There was a pause long enough to answer without words. When I hung up, the world didn't tilt, didn't break. It just went silent. I sat there, the smell of pine dust thick in the air, and stared at my hands. Hands that had built his cradle, his first toy chest, his first home. Now those same hands were shaking because the boy I raised had turned theft into his final form of desperation. I called my lawyer, Jack Reed. "It's time," I said simply. He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. That afternoon, while paperwork moved through fax lines and emails, I checked Ethan's social media out of a strange kind of curiosity. His latest video wasn't going the way he expected. The title read, "My father turned against me." I pressed play. There he was, sitting in a luxury apartment, crocodile tears glistening under perfect lighting. "My dad doesn't understand social media," he said to the camera, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "He's cutting me off financially because I made a few jokes online. I was just trying to make people laugh." The comments were brutal and divided. "Man, respect your dad. This guy's just playing victim. How dare he talk about his father like that?" Within hours, the tide turned. Someone must have leaked the truth about the bank incident. A headline appeared on my computer screen. influencer Ethan Harrison under investigation for attempted fraud against his own father. The photo beneath it was one of him smiling in front of his car, captioned with his own, quote, "Family is everything." It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion, one you tried to warn the architect about. By evening, sponsors had started pulling out. One of them released a statement. "We do not condone unethical conduct, even from our most prominent partners." His followers, the ones who once flooded his comments with praise, turned cold. "You deserve this. How could you do that to your dead?" And followed. Every cruel word that once belonged to my humiliation now returned to his doorstep. I didn't feel joy, not even satisfaction, just inevitability. He called that night. "Dad!" His voice cracked through the phone, half anger, half fear. "They're freezing my accounts. I can't access anything. The media's twisting everything. You have to help me." I stayed silent. "Dad, please," he said again, louder this time. "You don't understand how this works. I'll lose everything." Finally, I spoke. "No, Ethan, you already did." A pause, then a trembling whisper. "Was it you?" "No," I said. "It was you. You destroyed what you built when you forgot who you were building for." He didn't answer. The line went dead. The next morning his name was everywhere, trending again, but not for the reasons he liked. "Fall of a fraud," one headline said. "Son betrays father for fame." Another. Television anchors debated morality while sipping coffee between segments. Podcasts dissected his downfall. Commentators called it the digital generation's disease. But to me, it was just heartbreak with better marketing. For days, I ignored the noise. I stayed in my workshop, restoring an old walnut cabinet that had sat unfinished for years. The rhythmic rasp of the sandpaper became therapy. Neighbors dropped by, leaving pies or awkward condolences on my porch. "You did the right thing, George," they said. As if justice could ever feel right when it's carved from your own bloodline. At night, I sat by the window, the same window where Lydia once waited for Ethan to come home from prom. Now I waited for something else. Not him, not forgiveness, just the sound of peace returning to the walls. It came slowly, like rain easing after a long storm. A week later, my lawyer called. "It's done," he said. "All your accounts, properties, assets, secure. Ethan has no legal claim." "Thank you, Jack," he hesitated. "George, he's going to hit rock bottom." "Good," I said. "That's where solid ground starts." The next evening, I saw a local news segment titled "From Fame to Fallout." They showed Ethan's last live stream, shaky, unfiltered, his voice trembling. "I lost everything," he confessed to his remaining viewers. "Maybe I deserve it. For the first time in years, he looked human." I turned off the TV and whispered into the stillness. When the spotlight turns off, truth is all that remains. Then I blew out the lamp and let the darkness settle around me. Not as punishment, but as rest. Ethan's fame had been a fire, and finally it had burned itself out. 3 months passed. The leaves outside had turned brittle and copper. The air carried that early winter bite that makes every breath visible, proof you're still alive. I'd gone back to simple routines, morning walks, quiet meals, repairing furniture for neighbors who still remembered to pay in kindness instead of likes. The world had stopped buzzing with Ethan's name. The internet, like weather, always moved on, but fathers don't move on that easily. We linger in the echoes. One cold Saturday, I went to town for groceries. As I passed the square, a sound stopped me, faint guitar strings, raw and uneven. A voice followed, low, cracked, but familiar. I turned, and there he was, Ethan, sitting on the corner bench, shoulders hunched beneath a worn-out jacket, hair long, face pale. The confident influencer I once saw on screens was gone. In his place sat a man I barely recognized, eyes hollow, lips trembling as he played a song he didn't finish. A cardboard sign leaned against the bench. "Anything helps." For a moment I couldn't move. My body felt nailed to the pavement. The crowd passed him without care. Some tossed coins, others smirked, one took a photo. He didn't even notice. I approached slowly. When he finally looked up, his eyes widened in disbelief, then shame. "Dad." His voice broke mid-word. I said nothing. My breath came out in clouds between us. He set the guitar down. I didn't think you'd ever—" He stopped, words curling away like smoke. I studied his face, the dark circles, the beard, the hands red from cold. This wasn't punishment. This was consequence. "What happened?" I asked quietly. He laughed, a hollow sound. "Everything. Sponsors, followers, money, all gone. The bank froze what little I had left after. You know, and Sierra." He stopped himself. "She left. Said she wasn't built for failure." I nodded slowly. "And the friends?" He smiled bitterly. "They unfollowed faster than they followed. Guess loyalty doesn't trend." For a long while neither of us spoke. Just the faint wind and the squeak of his guitar case shifting against the stone. Finally he said, "I'm not here to ask for money or help. I just needed you to know that I get it now. Everything you said. Everything Mom used to say." He looked down at his hands. "I wanted people to see me, but I made them laugh at you. The only man who ever saw me for real." The words were clumsy, but they were real. I took a slow breath. "You finally understand the cost of cheap applause." He nodded. "Yeah, it costs everything." He wiped his nose on his sleeve, a child's gesture that pierced deeper than any insult ever could. "You eating?" I asked. He hesitated. "Sometimes. The shelter lets me stay when it's not full. Other nights I play out here. People give enough for coffee, maybe a sandwich." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a $20 bill folded in half. I held it out. He stared at it like it was something sacred. "I can't take that. I'm not giving it to you as a father," I said. "I'm giving it to you as a man who knows what it's like to go hungry." He took it slowly, hands shaking. "Thank you." The gratitude in his voice was quieter than the wind. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. "Dad, I ruined everything. I made you a joke." "I made myself one?" "No," I said softly. "You just traded respect for noise. The world taught you how quickly noise fades." He nodded, pressing the bill between his palms like a prayer. "I'll make it right," he whispered. "I swear." "I don't want you to be ashamed of me anymore." "I'm not ashamed," I said. "It hurts." "But I'm not ashamed." He blinked hard, tears slipping through. We stood there for another minute, father and son. Silence doing all the talking words couldn't manage. Then I said, "Take care of yourself, Ethan. Let the world forget you for a while. That's how people remember who they are." He gave a small nod. "I will." He sat back down, picked up his guitar, and started strumming a tune. It was off-key, but honest. The kind of song played more for healing than performance. I turned to leave. Every step away from him felt heavier, as if the air itself wanted to pull me back. But I didn't look behind. A father's love isn't about rescuing. It's about waiting until the lesson finishes teaching. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind scratch the windows. I thought of Ethan on that bench, his breath turning to fog, his fingers bleeding against the strings. Half of me wanted to drive back, wrap him in a blanket, bring him home. The other half, the wiser one, knew that would undo everything life had just started teaching him. So instead, I lit a candle near Lydia's picture. The flame flickered, gently, painting shadows across her smile. "I saw him today," I whispered. "He's fallen hard. But maybe falling is what it takes to touch the ground again." I let the candle burn low. As the wax pooled and the wick leaned, I realized something profound. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Ethan. Not at myself, not even at fate. The next morning I passed through the town square again. Ethan wasn't there. The bench was empty, except for a few coins glinting in the sunlight and one folded scrap of paper weighed down by a guitar pick. I picked it up. It said, "Dad, thank you for not saving me. I think I'm learning how to save myself." I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet, right beside Lydia's letter. That night, I wrote one line in my notebook: "Some lessons only the cold can teach," and for the first time in years, I smiled while writing it. Winter gave way to spring the way pain gives way to wisdom, quietly, without asking permission. The snow melted from the eaves, the creek ran free again, and the scent of cedar and thawed earth crept through every crack in the old house. Life, in its quiet persistence, had begun another cycle. 3 months had passed since I'd last seen Ethan on that park bench. I didn't know where he'd gone, and I hadn't tried to find out. Sometimes love means stepping aside and letting the world finish shaping what you can't. Then, one bright morning, someone knocked on the workshop door. The knock was hesitant, not the hurried rap of a salesman or the familiar rhythm of a friend. It was the sound of uncertainty. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened the door. There he stood, Ethan, clean-shaven, wearing plain clothes, a simple grey shirt and work boots scuffed from real labour. His hair was shorter, his eyes clearer. They still held guilt, yes, but there was something new there too. Humility. He held a small box in his hands. "Hey, Dad," he said softly. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "You don't have to ask. This is still your home." He entered slowly, glancing around the workshop. The smell of sawdust hit him, and I saw a flicker of memory cross his face. The kind that comes from childhood mornings spent handing me nails and asking endless questions. "You've been busy," I said. "Where have you been?" He smiled faintly. "Working. At the local carpentry shop on Elm. They needed help after the old foreman retired." I raised an eyebrow. "Carpentry?" He nodded. "Yeah, I told them I didn't have much experience. But the boss said everyone starts somewhere. Guess the name helped. Did you tell them whose name it was?" I asked. He shook his head. "Didn't need to. They just call me Ethan, the quiet one. I kinda like that." I smiled, the first real one I'd given him in years. He set the box on my workbench and opened it. Inside was a small carved wooden sculpture, rough but heartfelt. It was a pair of hands holding a hammer surrounded by swirling grain lines. The base was engraved with the words, "Man of Patience." I traced my fingers along the carving. The craftsmanship wasn't perfect. The edges uneven, the finish too thick in places, but it carried something no machine or influencer could fake. Sincerity. "Did you make this?" I asked. He nodded. "Took me 3 weeks. My boss helped me sand the base. He said every craftsman should make something that tells the truth about who they are. I guess this is mine." I swallowed hard. "It's beautiful." He smiled, eyes glistening. "I wanted you to have it before I try to make things right." I looked up. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I started volunteering at the youth center downtown, teaching some of the kids how to build birdhouses, fix broken chairs, that kind of thing. Most of them don't have dads around. I thought maybe I could show them a thing or two, the way you did for me." For a long moment I couldn't speak. The pride in my chest felt too heavy for words. He continued, voice trembling slightly. "I made another video, the last one. No ads, no sponsors. Just me talking. I told the truth about what I did to you, about how fame made me blind. I told them I hurt the man who gave me everything." He hesitated, watching my face. "I don't care if no one believes me. I just needed you to know that I'm not running from it anymore. I felt something in me give, not break but release. Years of frustration, grief and guilt dissolved in that quiet room filled with wood and forgiveness. I'm proud of you," I said finally. Tears welled in his eyes. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything." He took a shaky breath. "I want to pay you back someday. For the money, the damage, the name I dragged through the dirt." I shook my head. "Money can be replaced. Character can't, and you've already started paying me back every time you pick up a tool for the right reason." He laughed softly through his tears. "You always know what to say, huh?" "No," I said, smiling. "I just learned when to say nothing. That weekend the town held its spring fair. The community center displayed crafts from local artisans, chairs, tables, carvings. In the center of the exhibit stood Ethan's sculpture, mounted on a small pedestal with a plaque reading, "For George Harrison, the man who taught me that building is another word for healing." People gathered around, admiring it. Some recognized Ethan, whispered his name, then nodded with quiet respect. He stood beside me, not as an influencer, not as a failure, but as my son, steady, humble, human. The mayor even gave him a small certificate for artistic contribution, but Ethan didn't care about the recognition. His eyes were on me the whole time. After the fair, he said, "I think I'll stay in town a while." "There's still work to do inside and out," I nodded. "The door's open. Always has been." As the sun set, the last golden light touched the sculpture, making the wooden hands glow. Ethan looked at it and said softly, "To every father who built in silence, this is for you." I didn't answer. I just placed my hand on his shoulder, firm, forgiving, final, and as we stood there, the same thought crossed my mind that had haunted me months ago, but now felt like peace instead of pain. Sometimes life doesn't punish, it corrects. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is peace.